there's that level of great, say you want it, but if you're not doing any action, can you honestly say that you want it? I actually really like that distinction because, and I think what you said, Wendy, was really important, the humility to say, yeah, it sounds much better to say I value family than to say I value family. That doesn't sound as good. And
Mm,
what we know about addiction, especially sex addiction, is most, if I don't know, maybe all, there's a split between how I want to be seen, how I want you to see me versus how what the full truth is underneath that. So the public image, the facade looks a lot different than what's happening under the surface. So that actually takes some level of humility and self-awareness to say, I want to present this pretty picture of who I am, but maybe it's not so pretty. And every partner knows that, obviously, but the addict has to come to terms with that and say, yeah, my actions haven't shown that I value our relationship, that I value our family, and I have to come to terms with that. And I want to, but I can't. I love that idea of the humility to say, I want to work on this, and can I work on it? And what am I doing to actually work on that? I think that's helpful for the partner to know too.
It's interesting because through our listserv today, there was a question one of our CSATs asked, does somebody have a better template for a recovery plan other than the three circles and the cycle of addiction? And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting question. Like, why isn't that enough? Why wouldn't those tools be enough? And it's interesting because what we're talking about today could be part of that. Like a recovery plan, you can say, I'm going to go to 12 meetings a week and I'm going to do all these things. But what's the motivation behind it? Just to stay sober
Or to look good, like you're doing all the
or to
things,
look good that you're doing all these things? Check, check, check. I'm starting to think that getting sober, initial sobriety, is this deeper look at why am I getting sober? Like,
hmm,
what's the motivation to stop this behavior?
There's a transition there. And I love that. I've talked about the way that I frame it, which is sobriety is what we don't do, recovery is what we do. And when we initially start to get sober, I will say that it's been my experience that men who are in a relationship have an easier time getting sober initially than men who are single. And usually that's because the motivation for getting sober is I don't want them to be upset. I don't want them to leave me. I don't want them to, you know, I don't want to lose my job. I mean, when there's an external motivator, if I do this, that awful thing happens. It's easier to get sober that way. But we also know that if that remains their motivation, ultimately it's not going to be effective.
Mhm.
And so there's this piece of, okay, I start because I value not being in trouble. I value them not leaving. And in some ways, those values, I think, you can frame them positively, but I think at their core there, I value avoiding a consequence that is too painful for me. But when we move into recovery, I really think that part of how do I do my life differently is how do I start to lean into the values of recovery and what that means?